environment. And then there are some of the production that to talk about how you and I you.
Before then, actually.
Oh, before then.
Yeah, you major in film at some point. Yeah.
Okay. When you graduated, you came to my office. You to go and meet Femi Odugbemi because so it's some kind of mentoring important. But I think so. And to any story I want to tell, this is time. Otherwise, I still want to make maybe.
There is a there is a recurring cultural landscape, particularly. The audience is that after Saworoide, there are a lot of Yoruba films that I go away, for instance, introduce how the older ones tie their gele and things like that. You deliberately put in your you mentioned that you pick these things from books.
Opportunity, as you say, to document. And it was in the university to be part of the program, because that was intentional in so many areas, so every opportunity. So that's as far as Oleku is concerned. They are just not they are stop at that. You know, any movie that I to make sure that full attention even to the gastronomy. After the film was released, everybody, most of our ladies went cultural experience. Then in my own development too, for instance, things I pay attention to as a way of asked. You said if Professor Femi Odugbemi gave us that story all by herself. That is part of the story. That's it, because that one, it was important for me to document that Nigeria took to play Maami. So it was I'm sitting together. I could have said, look, but I've done about 8 adaptations. What that does, that
which of course ties into. I want you to expand a little more on enough in terms of adaptation. For some things, what is your process of the body of work that Nigerian writers monetary requirements of adapting stories
of filmmakers? It means that at the base level, interesting, because it is about image. I will recognize the person. I know when I meet this author, I will recognize him without. And sometimes I'm written by Professor Femi. It made so much impression on me. When I got there, Professor Femi was surprised. He goes into his library and brought out Maami. Surprised about this. He went again and said, first, and then Cordelia after that, to attack Cordelia until 10 years. My own imagination. And that is what it does. Or a large army. This is 1,000 soldiers. And I believe that I benefited source material. Definitely some fiction. And then there are some, that's how I start the process. First of all, I have already added work. In fact, I made an impression already. Negotiation. It's nothing more than, there's no doubt about it. So.
Okay, so because we would come with huge publishers' demand as well.
The reasons books, Maami and Cordelia. What are you doing? You have been lazy. I did, for instance, Dazzling Mirage by Yinka Igbokare. I walked and is so proud that with the adaptations that I have done.
From Oleku, Saworoide, completely just pick the life of a very big. Do you start off by, oh, this is how I want to use it? Inspires the kind of music that you.
From the cultural viewpoint, by the very nature of the Egungun, Ajamala, Ololu, and by extension, the particular drum, even procession, and that's what people. It's a process that comes to you, coming to me. It was Tunde Kelani's music. So I called him and said, Uncle Tunde, you have to be here, because he was in Nigeria with his the boost, the best that we have done. It's I should give them one of my old films, and they will orchestrate it in the US. We took a new one. And I went inside and brought out Cordella. This is what we did. But live to the film before we added the music. For Orlando Julius, and they orchestrated it, and then you can all the popular movies, you know, that's how. And if they hit it right,
in the course of this particular festival, they also have to be scientific. And I noticed that your work, I will give an example. You particularly following the Aruba girls. Your work speaks to documentary speaks to Aruba and things like that. Or is it?
You have answered it yourself. It's followed Jimo Brahmo and Dept Fabumi, all of them. I just interested, especially if you love, and I would have drowned in that river. Anytime we are going for swimming in that ocean river, they just got the river grove many times. And then I spent a few years with them. So let's go to the shrine, and we all go to the shrine. Start conservation with taboos. Wash clothes and do all those. And then the elder whatever you do is never get cooked. And they cook well, they're sweet. Where is still green. Most of those ones you can go and try it, because anytime, so they don't go and hunt in those places. Follow the procession, and you are close to those people. On the month, whatever they cooked, beans, someone carried their away to that place. You know, so it's about, you know, so after I made a documentary about Osun Osogbo, and I thought, wait a minute, H is a virgin, abstain from sex until prevention, if you care. There are ways to do it, rather than encouraging the condom, so there are things in it. So you could say that
I will come to the house after this question. Yeah,
Google, I do Google Fishing Festival, by the way.
Voodoo Festival. How's it? Yoruba Beyond Borders. And then Ayinla is also
principal characters in Ayinla. Ayinla's story. So I've documented
your personal cultural experience.
I was just fortunate because I didn't have to Abeokuta and threw me in the family compound to live with my father because at that point, there are 5 books. Igbo forest, Olodumare, the forest of. Once you remember those 3, then you remember Adito Oloduniti. During possibly for breakfast you eat eba that you grab as much protein as is free. So you can just eat as much as. Why the thing about the Yoruba culture, spirituality, child may faint or may have cooked vegetable with small. Here the Oro festival. You know, so we start to document everything that filmmakers is to go back when I did any man who is dating sex in time, you are gone, you die. Is he very active? So posted it. I went on television and said that he has been able to make a video, dispel most of the myths. So you can do a lot back to where you grew up and go and doing some archiving on your own. That's how you can proceed.
He was you are telling everybody so don't say that. Anyway, there's been too much challenge around that. But because you were in the audience,
Abidin.
exactly.
Grant.
So I want to ask, is that your new trend around these personalities that you then went to do Cordelia, so you broke that?
I was trying to keep it a secret. They find me. Of course, that's the next film I'm going to make. One of course, the instrumentation and how it was fabricated. It jumped not to in between. Now you see now, and the grandson. That lifetime, she was the same thing.
All right, we have another person.
So that's not.
We can't wait.
I want to, since then, I go to Professor Yayi. I was with you there. I want to say something that is very important. And
They get crazy about.
Brazil has got about to have an affiliation with Orisha. Uniting affiliation. You wonder what actually led there in Brazil. You just come on. So I always want to ask, connect it with that galactic or that we pass through to them. You'll be stunned to Nigeria. So some asking, get that to Nigerians and let's see. Even before Nigeria started out, Nigeria, I've tried it.
Own journey is that I went to lectures, the authors, all those. I worked. We all slept in their homes because just from casual conversation next, and then I said. And then he told me, do you know that sometimes this is how I get some of those stories? Sounds that come up again and again. That's interesting. Most of them are close to conclusion and said, we have the most professors in the country. Oja Ejigbo Mekun. Of buying a horse is divination. And the Ifa tells, and then he goes on this journey. Frail. If the woman collapses and dies. Well, we know her son, but the son has trapped out. The third day, he must do 3 and decided, well, this is my calling. I have to. He now wants to continue on the journey to the market. But arrived and they were the man was the only bodin. He gave your mother a befitting burial. We'll do another border here. And he put another border. Purpose. Orumila had more than the people who went to the market. They are going to say, feed in me, so Olo see me, lower, richer than anybody else. Now, we would do the text of each of you have everything you need.
Sir.
Yeah, my name is Babatola Adeyemi. Just tell you, I appreciate you so much, sir. I follow you, and I'm so. We have a generation that doesn't read anymore. I never linked reading. You have inspired me, sir. Because of the fact that I read of her birth, what she gave birth to her. Now she's a very, very renowned. And what you have said about how you tie reading to this reading from that you have told us about, how can I from that book?
Okay.
How can yes.
Okay.
Lord, and you got inspired from that you start your filmmaking.
Read more. Read for pleasure. Because I know in Abeokuta, love, because that's what you need to You understand? So, and I've already declared that nobody can do it. But please.
All the sounding applause for TK.
Class session because of to learn. In fact, it's like reading a book. So it's asking us to read you being present. I'm just lobbying you because you are the next. Can we settle down, please, this evening? Because this time we will not throw chair. We're doing January 9, we're in Ibadan to celebrate him. Then 2 or 3 scholars in the art without mentioning. The man who wrote showing mentees and comrades and associates have been teaching you. So we're dedicating this, it's just a tribute to him. That's why his picture is not. And what we have done in that stampede is to continue the kind of work that he's doing. So it's not my job to something that was done on him, which we were not able. All of us who encounter him, we could together also here. They will be on the panel too. We've been us who are members of us. One of us who is in the front, do not. This is one of the best editors in this town. The director of the festival is the executive.
Was alive with intellectual hunger. It was a
his father in particular. He wasn't a bully, very nice. In 1961, I was first coming in my book is looking, you say, like a boy from Warrior or Sable every day at school. I mean, not right, and then needs your flower beds, and they didn't come for inspection. He said, BJ, we don't like the way you've been caring them. On the day of the grading, there's no contradiction between the BJ. They're wrong. You must fight them. As a child, he said that let's have better food for students.
At the University of Ideas, Literature.
We then met him. Actually, he was at school with university like BJ. When he studied English, for the first time in our own class.
Criticism for his first class when, as it were, colleagues saying some don't have it at all. It undue excess. It on his door. That risk.
Intellectuals were tested as a voice insisting that academic and society were inseparable. He's
no excuse at all. BJ was as it were.
By the Obasanjo military, Maduna, all of them. There are some the Okewos.
His eyes turned red.
For ASU meetings himself in the car. BJ was on car.
I remember one day I left early, maybe next week. When I came back, then
carried him beyond Nigeria. He shaped debates on African literature and post-colonial thought.
Literature was a mirror, therefore to question it not in abstract terms, but in any serious work. How I personally, from the reviews of my works by shared a lot of perspectives. We shared a lot, understood or not. BJ is it's bad. He will tell you, it's not good enough.
He did not dominate a room. He awakened it. He did not seek.
Ago, presenting my first channel letter, a long letter, arguments to the text. He told me to let theoreticians were secondary. And I have always remembered, and variously to the works of African dramatists. These writers were no friend of the new nation. For them, decolonize formed national consciousness towards these goals.
Feed your eyes on those one came across some of the most fascinating and about Antonio Gramsci. And when I got into my own postgraduate work of cultural nationalism, as it is,
beyond a father, a grandfather.
Firebrand kind of power about him and like a presence. I think that in a way even the same way I've seen him give talks or to just speak with him very inquisitive person, very curious about what our ideas are, what we think. And those personalities start to develop and grow every 4 years or something like that. And he was coming 2 months. Every Sunday he sent them. Understood what my work can sometimes be an interest in just, how I might, So I think your practice, but also
80 years of thought, just weeks after celebrating that milestone.
Social democratic state, not of resources and redistribution simultaneously.
Things like this do not disappear. They echo in children and grandchildren.
Many people will mourn, but he has done Shakespeare. He said, we don't know what he looks like, never mind the photo.
Ideas and of
I was extremely, deeply touched by all the different, but I have been so, in many cases, the most cherished are with my students, former students. Different places, and I thank you.
Hello? And in between that time, possibilities are there. But that was our tribute to dissect the scapegoat. Yeah, see him in the room. I think he's doing he's a lawyer, he's a writer, he's a player. But from the article that we got it, and I thank Lauda. Kunle Ajibade, profiler of Biodun J4, because J, who is also is also dean of. You are trapped. The Cora is convening this particular. But somebody can help me to get him. We'll bring him in. I'll go and get students, but who couldn't make it? She was like being very stressed. No, she already come alive. Here comes. I told Kayode that I can even join. No, see, my volunteers are always outside. I don't know what they do so that we can get the book across to you.
The PA system. Yes, thank you very much. So the top, we all know that to archiving, police, library and archive family. I hope firm or to reveal to us. So I hope he joins us very soon. So that's very mainstream knowledge that supports, that documents history of social movements, rescue these things, pamphlets is important. Another thing, besides the preservation of research, or whether it's actually living information, these are all the things that come out of. One is very on colonial archives. You have curated photography of a film, that is essentially a period of 2 years ago, I believe, involved in the film, I think twice. A lot of an academic who studying archives. And were there things that happened, have been documented or have been kept these errors as scholar, as practitioner of archive? Hello.
They found you, and without the likes of Professor Bionu or as older men, they used to hearing these incredibly smart people. There's just no way I can describe that experience. Relive and recast. Just like came at a historical moment in Nigeria. It was education. You might remember we went through a civil global. We had professors from virtually every broadly global ideas of how to is perhaps the best example to do philosophy and literature. Philosophy student, a lot of us saw ourselves as recall the importance of products of what he had, the academic, because him and Dr. Emil Gumishan, and I'd seen him. So this is all to say that it's legible. There's a huge community, believe it or not. And I can't thank only of Wole Soyinka, but today we'll see. It's away. So And that kind of concern is what, and I can't bring everybody together.
That has, I think the news started troublous, periods, and then eventually became jail. So in the last few years, especially, between, would have heard the other participant experiences and reach that.
So much for, let me also, it's a one visited with him. You could see far away house was built all out of memory. Morrissey. So that resonated, it's in the biggest in the place. Help him recruit someone. What's his name now? Damola Awoyokun is signed. He was very young, and Professor Bia, that Kayode Komola, an archivist, data of memory. Later on about memory, when the end is it, that we were really fantastic. This is every location, and everybody was like upbeat. And here was this first time ever. What history have you quickly got over it? Temporary and ancient, right? How was history being taught in this country? Apparently, many could not read that, right? So who were not taken through their own institutions that were the classroom. So you could understand, we'll say what he said for June 12, was in 1993, that history. But how old today? How old? Maybe it's a history. To set up institutions, to not impatiently, patiently. So that challenge is, and the way people, Awam and I were talking about the sector. We not want that, that it will make people, right?
I would throw a last question to all of us. I really would have wished that Mr. Komolafe would have been there, because that question would have actually come from what I wanted to ask him in terms of the models that we can then begin to look at, for archiving. But first, let me go to Mr. Akinsho. You are the Secretary General of Kora. You've been for many decades now. And then in the late 90s, you also started Lagos Book and Art Festival, which has run since then. Why I'm saying this is that your work has, in fact, your work in terms of memory and preservation is that first, you are a creator of memory. A lot of the conversations that have happened in Stampede, what we're actually doing now is called Stampede. And it happens regularly, either with an event, a festival like this, or independently. Those conversations have been in newspapers. Some of them have, have had communiques come around them. So you've generated some of the most important debates around, particularly around culture and arts in Nigeria. And then there also was a time that Kora then was publishing, and then your Festival was publishing LACAG, Lagos Art Calendar, that basically was documenting what was happening in the social sector, from clubbing to galleries to exhibitions and the rest of it, for a period, And also a few years ago, Kora then started a library that today is I think it's housed in Freedom Park. Yeah. Now, this is a wide gamut from creating, document that should be archived to actually doing some sort of work of archiving. Now, what has driven all of this, and then what are the challenges that you've noticed, and then do you think that there are opportunities for furthering this kind of work? And, what is yet to be done? How do we build institutions, key institutions around those kind of work to make sure first that they're accessible, and then secondly that they continue to in fact engage active and living, activities in terms of creation of memory. and all the current emerging social movements, that we have. What do you think, can still be done? What has your experience been like across all of those, and what can still be done in terms of institutionalizing things like that?
Thank you very much, Deji. I like Kunle and Afam, who were essentially also 78 to 82 set of the University of Ife, like myself. It's interesting that that's a deliberate, I don't know who decided to do this. Awam went to Ife in 1979 as direct entry. I went to Ife in 1979 as direct entry. And so it's that environment, and I think that's the reason why I'm going to talk to environment before I respond to your question. The environment of the University of Ife was that in which a biology student like Lagbaja walks into a workshop in Oduduwa Theatre where Ornette Coleman is discussing jazz. Those are the kind of people who came to Ife. And he listens, and there's this small geology student who is also in the hall. And it didn't matter whether you are a science student or the material was just in the air. It was in your face, I mean, everywhere in your face, you're seeing Olarotimi's if. There's a line after if. There's if, blah, 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 and it was such an enormous material, that no one, whether you're a medical student or an agric engineering student, will fail to grasp what the humanities were doing all over the place. If you were working on your samples, your geochemistry samples, in the basement lab of the geology department, you are listening to drumming across the road at the pit theater, and you are wondering whether you shouldn't just leave the samples you are digesting and walk on. And so that was the atmosphere in that. I don't know what I would have turned out to be if I wasn't in that particular environment in those years. Now, that's also the way I see the Guardian environment when I chose not to pursue the geology option and go to work as a journalist. People like Biodun Jerifo, while Kunle and Awam were students, I was never a student of, but the thing is that when you are in that kind of environment like University of Ife in that period, you are conscientized into, and you sit down trying to do your story, and Biodun Jerifo walks into the Guardian, and everybody is hanging around, trying to have a conversation, and you are thinking that you are missing something, and you then begin to follow what those three scholars were doing, Jerifo, Oshofison, Oshundare, Yemi Ogunbi, and you would think in 1983 Guardian, you would think that what was most important in Nigeria was the march to the left. And then there was this character called Patutomi, who was, much younger. He was, while the Jerifos were something like 12 years, 13 years older than myself, Patutomi was not even 5 years older. He had been made, he had been cooked, and he was writing from the right. While the people who, the dominant position, the dominant ideologic position in Nigerian newspapers in the 80s were to the left, because they were being led by the Ibadan Ife axis.
And this character was from Nsukka. He was much younger, and he had picked a doctorate in the US, and he was insisting that you needed to, build, you needed to encourage entrepreneurialism, exceptionalism, and that you needed to understand that liberal democracy, in the way that the West practiced it, was the way forward. So it was a torrent, all of those things were happening. I would not pretend that they are not happening now, but the point is that they were so concentrated, in the spaces that we all were. Now, I need to move quickly to the second point in my head, and that second point is the notion of the diaspora and the local. We always argue that when people live here, then we've lost them. But the careers of Biodun Jeifo and Awa Mankpa, and a number of scholars who have moved out, is that they've gone to actually do the work of engagement with the Nigerian story. I mean, much more than would have happened if they had stayed in Lasu or even that so-called Ife, because the Ife that is there today is not that Ife of the 80s, As a matter of fact, as of 1983, Professor Mabogunje in his book was saying that Ife was in decline. I mean, the quality of curriculum. That was a time, that was a period that we had just left, and he was already, which means that the decay had been setting for quite a while. But what I'm trying to bring out from that is that Joifo's scholarship had been on Shoinka, has been on modern African drama. They were not necessarily, of course, in terms of comparative literature, there's a lot that it takes from Western praxis, but there's a whole lot that helps Africa in terms of the imagination, in terms of the insight that those books come with, and that's what happens when you probably even understand the Nigerian contemporary art more, when you read a Chika Okeke Agulu's about 5 or 6 books, I mean, starting from his engagement with the Zaria rebels, the revolution in Zaria in the 50s, which basically determined the course of contemporary visual art in Nigeria, and works like Grillo, and works like, I'm trying to remember the name of this Ghanaian sculptor, Anna Natsui. When you read those texts, and this is written in Princeton, I do not see any scholar, and I'm very sorry, that's in Unilag or that's doing that level of work. And so I'm saying that going out, especially for humanities, of course, if you are a geologist and you go to the US, you've been lost, certainly. You can't, there's no basin that looks like the Niger Delta we've lost you, I mean, if you're an engineer, well, maybe we'll gain you in some other way. But the point is that the humanities have gained a lot from this Japa syndrome, much more than, and people like Jeifo, the work that they've done, are the kind of work that you look at and you say, they are using the text as the archive. I mean, they've basically built a museum that you want in those books. It is now how you now imagine them in a way that can be popular. And that's the next point that I want to get to. I think that where that transition from text to images is the primary challenge of the Nigerian society. A lot of the reasons why we decided to do programs and do book festivals was because we come here and we speak and we talk, and you can publish all of those books, but people are not seeing those things, happening in real life. But when we say, for example, that at the Stampede, say in 1995, we worried about the lack of spaces for exhibitions. And we discuss that, and we tell people that Echo Bank, this size, you know, you never imagined this size of gallery, and this space is a gallery. You never imagined if you were sitting down in Lagos somewhere in 1995, even 2000. I mean, the galleries in Lagos are essentially one flat that somebody converts and then he exhibits Nigerian art. So there's been there can be significant progress even from that talking, but you could do a lot more. I mean, that transition from text, which is basically what Tunde Kelani has done all his life, you know, is the thing that is a challenge now. How do you ensure that people know about, I mean, there is history. When you talk about history in terms of the way the Americans imagine it, it's via the film. You know, it's via the songs, it's via the performances. They have come to understand it. And I think that the archiving thing needs to be animated in that frame for us to really, really have a proper conversation. I mean, the challenge that Kunle talked about, The Man Died, which is essentially a Nigerian Civil War era book, you know, that is now, you know, produced, you know, on film. The challenge that he talked about, the producers of Chimamanda Adichie's Half of a Yellow Sun also had those things, so that when it came to showing the people, you know, in the north carrying out the pogrom, they couldn't use the kind of clothes that will show that these are northerners. You understand? And I mean, it's important that the Director General of the Film Archive, you know, I mean, the country's film censors board is here. You know, they couldn't use it because that's what the censor said you are going to inflame. So yes, but at least the story was told, and we need to continue to have that conversation. But I need to also say that we can get a little narrow when we worry too much about this, you know, not having had history in the curriculum, because history, well, as Kunle has said, even when we were reading history, we were reading Mungo Park discovered you know, it wasn't nuanced, you understand? So the history that we also took wasn't as if it was, but the reason why I'm bringing this out is that Chimamanda Adichie wasn't born until 1971. I don't remember when she was born, but she wasn't born at the, you know, and she wrote that book, you know. So, and I've read significant works that are written by people who are just in their 30s about Ojukwu as one of the earliest post-colonial Nigerian billionaires. You know, that is Sir Louis. So, and these people weren't necessarily born at the time. So the thing is that it's interest, and we can generate that interest outside of a curriculum. As a matter of fact, we need to begin to challenge ourselves to do more work of scholarship outside of the academia if they are slacking. You know, it is because the Nigerian academia slacks that we seek refuge in works by Akinade Shokon, Ogaga Ifowodos, you know. I mean, the people that I've mentioned who are either in Cornell or Indiana University and are doing stuff that are very important to telling the Nigerian story. So really, I mean, there's a whole lot more collaboration that is needed. I think that whatever Cora is done is important, but, you know, a larger community has to come together. I don't know if I've made that sense. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. TK, you're actually supposed to be the chairman of this panel, and I think it's not. TK is not. Oh, I'm sorry about that. Yeah. I mean, it would have been a nice, especially when you were mentioning the films, you know, and the rest of it. I was interested in that bit too. I mean, Biodun Jeyifo said something that the work of criticism, you know, has to also engage with what you call the social life of the art itself. That is art not in terms of the subject that is treating, but in terms of that art itself, how was it disseminated, how has it shifted, from time to time. And the work of somebody like TK has done that, taking a book that was almost forgotten, and TK did something extraordinary that people probably don't give him credit for. There is this thing called Oleku, the style of, he basically, through that film, resurrected in 1960s fashion, so much so that you need to correct young people today and say, no, the name of the style is not Oleku. Oleku was what people called it in the 2000s because of the firm, it was a bonfo that was long forgotten in the 60s and the rest of it, but that, so a fashion basically came back, and so that's how, art can just go back into the archives and bring things back, and it becomes part of the social experiment. But I'm going to have a last question for members of the panel, and then we're going to open it up. And I think also, Justin, to what you are talking about, we need to look beyond the former academy. I was going to ask Mr. Komolafe in terms of what the plan they have for solar in Calabar. Because, as I said when I was opening this panel, it's not as though anywhere in the world that radical and left, archives that pertain to leftist and radical materials are, exactly that they are in this place and they are hallowed and the rest of it. They are always vulnerable. And in the last decade or 2 decades, that actually in places like New York and London, you began to see things like interference archives, you began to see things like mainstream archive in London that are beginning to gather materials documenting social history across the decades that were being lost. In fact, the archive in London started when they started discovering that lefty materials are being dumped on refuse dumps. People just see refuse dump and see pamphlets, very historic, that are linked to historical movement. So they are beginning to bring them together. And the way those things are engaged, especially by the independent archives, has always been that, look, we don't want it for research. We don't want it to be there, and then when somebody wants to write an academic paper, we want it to continue to be engaged by even new people, which goes to what we are talking about. And so you are going to speak to that they must continue to engage this, as a basis for, moving forward. And then you also have those archives that are becoming linked to what you may call established institutions. So in New York, you have New York University, for example. If you look at this school, then the New School, which is like a university in New York that tends to be more leftist and all of that, and so teaching curriculum that are not central. And they hold a lot of archives that probably, I don't know how radical New York University is and the rest of it, but certainly archives may shrink at it, but they say, look, we need to preserve this. So what are the options that are available to us, for example? The kind of archives that Cora holds, for example, documentation. Just to talk on a personal level, and Samuel just stepped out. I remember the first time it was in, maybe in the 2000s, that for the first time we started, working on archiving, documenting, and cataloging materials that archive had collected over the years. He did the work. I was just supervising him at that time, So what are the opportunities for things like solar and the rest of it, vulnerable archives, that document aspects of our social cultural history? What are the options available to us? What are the options for independent, institutions? What are the opportunities for a UNILAG, for Pan-African University to be able to hold some of those archives? What are the opportunities you see in there, and what are the difficulties that you see? So I will start from Dr. Afam. Akpa, who has also done some of the works you have also done in Ghana, in Abu Dhabi, in terms of setting up those institutions, what they are doing. So how do you see the options for Nigerian vulnerable vulnerable materials in terms of archiving? What are the options? What are the models that we can use?
Thank you. I think it's also vulnerable moments. If you take, for instance, BJ was, he was part of collectives outside the university setting, apart from the trade union, right? Even when he became ASU president, way back where he had a Volkswagen Kombi where we were typing documents as he was traveling because those days you have to roll the paper out, you know, so when it was illegal to print out. So we don't know where those things are. Those were days where there were mimeograms, and then there were other things that you look back and you think, for us, let's say we're teaching here today so that the kids in NSAS will remember that there was a moment in Nigeria where the opposition party to the military dictators were the student unions, right? And where the universities were, but there are no archival documents other than anecdotes, right? Or beer parlor anecdotes. So that's sad because there's no continuity. So it's like flaring gas. That's a body of knowledge that just went off, you know, and become what we have private conversations with. There are other things too that BJ was related to, organizations that were informal, but hot places of learning and argumentation and activism and so on. For me, I mean, 5 years ago, I was part of a team that wanted to look at archiving artistic practices in the Arab world. And at that time, the wars were in different flashes. And we stopped, the grant ran out last year, just before the current war. And now most of those archives are now orphaned. So we have to find institutions. And the way we did it, we didn't just build the archives and yank them to a university. We built them in the locations they are at. And local people were using them. And they were a network of archives. So, but when any one of them gets vulnerable, you pick it up and put it somewhere else where it's less vulnerable. So archiving as a way of producing knowledge and networking different entities became a model. In Ghana, there was a guy called Kofi Ganaba, also called Guy Warren. Yeah, he was a drummer who started the first high life band in Ghana. Then he went to the United States and he started playing with jazz, bebop, and then he returned back to Ghana. But before Ghana, in Monrovia, he was installed by the now CIA to be the DJ at Voice of America Monrovia. And his job was to put together, to introduce African American jazz to Africans by radio. And he was like a go-between. So when the jazz ambassadors were visiting during the Cold War, he was the MC. Now when he retreated to Ghana, everything was in the middle of his living room. It took us 1.5 years to do an inventory, a catalog system, and then to create something that is accessible readily for students, firstly at Ghanaian universities and then globally at NYU and elsewhere. So archiving takes, where we're talking, even iREP, that's how it started. We're saying, where are the documentaries made by young Africans talking about this everyday story of contemporary Africa? That's how iREP started. So it tells us that knowledge is not only in the classroom. The university is important, but not the only thing that should exist. In fact, we don't want a university student to only be trapped in the university. They have to trap in the other parts of the world they have to impact on. So we have to, for us, build parallel infrastructure for engaging with our culture and also education in general. So for me, there's so many examples of missed opportunity. That's why I say, if we don't do it, it's like what happens in the oil fields when we flare gas, right? Because the gas that could be useful for other forms of energy. That's what we're doing. We're flaring all this important community-developed knowledge that we don't know what to do with it. And then we don't know how to handle things that are anomalies. right? I mean, yesterday we had a panel, and I said, how can you explain to yourself, or if you have a child, that it's dangerous for a young girl to go to school in the same country? You can't just say it's happening in one other corner of the country. You have a responsibility. It's a humane or inhumane activity that we can't actually be able to educate our daughters, right? So, or they go to school with trepidation. And even if they go to university, there actually, statistically, I found this out, there are more women of our generation with university degrees than men. But they're not represented in the labor force, right? So it cascades down and down and down. Now, if that information is not available, what are we doing? We're just reactive. But if we want to be proactive in producing the knowledge of our own about ourselves, we have to provide infrastructure for archiving the stories. There's no reason why the young people we're training in iREP, like we did in Ghana, we gave them cameras and say, go get your parents and your grandparents' stories. And we chose the very best and showed them in the festival as well. So those kinds of archiving where the kid is knowing their family afresh, right? Because they're documenting it is different from story time, all right? And they were able to even edit it because they were selecting the things that they feel are not appropriate to include in the story. So that's why with iREP, we're saying each year we have themes. We'll tell the students that the young people coming from colleges and high schools that they should focus on a particular theme. We'll give them the skills and the support to make those films. And I think that's why this year the mobile phone workshops was very important for them, and to be led by somebody of Tunde Kelani's status added increase in value to that archiving process. It could be entertainment, but it could also be an archiving of our culture and knowledge.
Thank you very much, Professor. Yes. So, Mr. Ajibade, will you respond to that question as well? What are we to do now in terms of building the institutions? I mean, you already mentioned it. After the initial anger, with then the understanding that, look, we just haven't created anything for them to look at. So what do you think we can do under the circumstance?
Just, to add to what Awam has described and said, I think that money is key to all this, You could have all these keys in the world that you want to pass on or translate, right? You could have the capacity to, to build institutions, but if you don't have money, nothing gets done. I think we've got to also pay attention to how to source for funds. Awam and I were talking about how the breakthrough to make demand die, finally came. And I said, my God, so if that had not happened, if that money had not come, so it's important for us to know how to source for these funds. I know how agonizing it was for TK at a point, to raise funds for one of his films. I think I wanted to celebrate a film of his, and I said, TK, he had written something in the paper that I love so much. And I said, TK, because of, this knowledge that you have, you should do more of this, for newspapers. And he said, raw paper, lele, what have I appreciate? We are looking for money to do another film. You are talking of writing for you and writing for the press. I think that how to source for funds, where this money is, and how we can access it is absolutely important. It is key to how to get this thing done.
Thank you very much. So,
I think there should be workshops on fundraising, of course, but if we're using TK as an example, TK would have done the man died like 40 years ago. He will do it on a shoestring and he will deliver it. So, I mean, what it also means is that whatever you have, use it to do what you want to do. But that when I talk like that, it tends to look like one is degrading what, because, you know, there's a lot of, I mean, quality stuff in the man died, you know, I mean, so, and you wouldn't get to that kind of level if you don't really have money, you know. So yeah, it was good that NYU, and that's what I'm talking about. If Awam had stayed there and become a professor at Suleja University, that's the truth. We won't have the man died. So it's this whole diaspora thing is important, and we're not engaging it enough. I mean, when they come, we won't allow them to teach. I mean, I have petroleum engineering, colleagues who have excelled in the oil industry, right? And they came from, say, Abu, and they can't teach in Abu because they won't let them. I have people, you know, I have geologists who can't teach in, I mean, that's the truth. I mean, these characters who say, you know, they are, I mean, already feeling somehow once you show up, you know. So there's a whole lot of problem, but that's not what I wanted to respond to. I wanted to respond to the fact that, you know, you talk about something for the archive. I mean, you describe some archive as what now? No. Some, I mean, they are vulnerable. Yeah. I'm always liking to. I always prefer to start from answers. I think that we're not even doing enough work of programming. You know, programming is getting the public to come to somewhere. You know, that one, we need to do far much more work on that than even the archiving itself. You know, I mean, a lot of the time, I mean, look, I don't know what's happening at I know that J.K. Randall does a lot of stuff about, you know, but, you know, it is only because he's doing all of that people are able to go and see the issue. You understand? But a lot of museums don't even know that they need that. If Kudus is not ensuring that we all come and do some play outside, I mean, when your friend, the Senator Femi Odugbemi, when he came, he said, I mean, when we were doing the Labaf, you know, he said he needed to see you at the museum. So you guys went to the museum, and it's because you came for Labaf. If there wasn't a program, if there weren't a set of programs around those places, and they are always not there. Government is always wanting to form, I mean, when they agree with this, for example, archiving we're talking about, government characters will go and now build a place and put something and nobody will go there. So so we need to talk about programming.
We're not thinking of virtual museums and virtual archives.
Even if you have virtual, you also need to do programming around it. Do you understand? We had a virtual meeting today, about 7 or so. Most of them are dramatists, actors, you know, scriptwriters, you know. And it wasn't, you know, there were about five people outside of the country. The moderator was talking from London, Lukman Sanusi. I was there in Lagos. Francis Onwuche is here. He was in that before we came here. That, you know, so, but you have to be intentional about that about people showing up, you know, and it also will, so it will affect how you frame even that archiving. I mean, I hadn't gone to Berlin for a long time. The last time I went was 2006. They just set up that, you know, the Checkpoint Charlie, you know, that. And, you know, it wasn't that, I didn't care about what their war was. But I enjoyed looking, when I went to those things, I enjoyed soaking myself in the massive atmosphere. So but it's because I was told about it. They could have set up that thing, and if they didn't ensure that they were doing things different, for example, myself, Remiraji, we were going for a movie, a South African movie, because there was also a simplex in that area, So if we weren't going for the movie, we might not have seen so those things you need to do these things with a mind that, if you are in Mushi, what would the trader want? What's she thinking? That sort of thing. And that's what Kudos is doing there. And you can imagine the footfalls to the J.K. Rando relative to the museum across. It just tells you programming. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Where's Jahman? How many minutes do we have for question and answer for questions? We have how many minutes? 20 more minutes for. Yes, but I think we've all. We've heard the panelists. The last thing you say actually also goes to what I was saying about some of these independent archives that are arriving, in New York, in London, when they are saying, because we're about social movement, it's not about just keeping it for researchers or for people to come. It's about engagement, making sure we engage. And then Mr. Ajibade spoke about, how do you raise money, money for it, and then Professor Ampa has spoken about his experience in Ghana, in Abu Dhabi, and then in actually building a network community of, a network of communities that are custodians of these archives can use it, and when one becomes vulnerable somewhere, you can take it elsewhere. These are all things that have come out. So I'm going to open the floor now, and so if you want to either speak to any of the issues that have been raised there or ask questions, you can. I understand Mr. Edmond Naibe would like to speak, so I have noted that. Or was I misinformed? Was I misinformed? Not. Okay. So you can. Sorry, who's raising their hand? Oh, okay. I didn't see. Okay, you want to? Okay. Then is there any other person? So sorry, can you hear me pass? Mr. Naibe, I think because, yeah. Then Mr. Bello. Yes, I've heard about. Oh, you're not? I was surprised because I didn't see his hand. Okay.
Good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here today, particularly with in this new environment that iREP is projecting itself. The coincidence, like Tony pointed out, that there are so many BJ students coincidentally here, that falls in that circle of 78, 82. I happen to be one of them. I did not receive many lectures from BJ, yet BJ loomed larger than being in the dramatic arts department that I was. Part of the curriculum of that time was that, like Awam said, you have to also take courses in other departments. BJ, in the 1 or 2 electives that we had to do in literature department, was a big influence. But BJ's influence was not really because he was a lecturer in literature department. His influence was because he was an activist, and as teenagers and young men in their 20s, you couldn't help but being participants in the activities that were going on in the campus. And one of them was in the debates And BJ was a very, very strong debater who was ready to take up any person. 2 debates stood out for me. In October, November 1978, Tola Adeniyi, then columnist in the Daily Times, had come to Ife and then was presenting, was giving a lecture on a topic I can't pin my hands on now. But what I remember was that he said Obasanjo was an indisciplined head of state, simply because he could not have his own personal discipline in bringing himself up as a soldier to stand physically. And that has led him into taking policies that has led Nigeria into a comatose. As a teenager, somebody talking about your then head of state, which is the equivalent of a president, in that manner was very, very shocking. But the dimension with which BJ took it that same day, in that same lecture, was such that by the end of that lecture, we were barely 3 weeks old as students of the university. But by the end of that lecture, most of us had gone on to register in the Alliance of Progressive Students, ALPS, because he had not only fired up the interest of the students to become radicals, but to want to change and make a difference in the society. The other lecture, again, was when BJ spoke at the demise of Walter Rodney. And then the radical collectives in Ife organized this lecture on Walter Rodney. Walter Rodney, by the way, was the Jamaican who wrote How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. That book was the go-to book and very formative in the radicalization of the Nigerian students of that era, along with Frantz Fanon's book, The Wretched of the Earth. Now, Biodun J4 influenced so many students of that generation, like Tony Akiosho, who was not a literature student, or those of us who were not history students, who were not English literature students, but who were students who were very interested in reading and knowing and being part. My concern years later was the fact that we have not been able to replicate the likes of BJ in our present day institutions of higher learning. And we have not been able to also replicate people in terms of being able to mobilize the younger generation to be relevant and to be committed to transforming the society. By this, I am saying that in the academic world, the lecturers are free to give students the benefit of their research, sociology, but in the outside world.
Mr. Enaibe, can you in a minute?
Okay, I will.
Thank you.
In the outside world, we do not have such influences with that kind of verve that the BJs had. Dikule Ajibades went into journalism. Some of us also did go into journalism. We also went into production to see how we could also influence the society in the things that we not only write about, but also acted, and try to see how we can bring them to bear. I am concerned that the influencers of today do not have, I am concerned that we have lost so much outside the country that we do not have enough to influence the younger Nigerians. I am concerned that the younger Nigerians for whom this discourse, the lives of the likes of BJ and Soyinka that we have today are not here to experience those touch, those flashes of life that are very necessary for our development as a country.
Thank you.
BJ was good.
Thank you.
BJ lived, and BJ will never die.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, you want to? Okay. Yes, I have three people. Dr. Shoaib Hussein. Dr. Husseini. Yes, that's the Director General of the video. I don't know if you changed your name, Census Board. I'll come to you, but I have two people that I need to speak with. First, I'll ask when that book is going to come out that you promised, which is part of work of documentation and archives, the contentious issue about film history in Nigeria and all of that. You are going to publish a book, or your organization is going to publish a book documenting at the very minimum when you started, registering films in Nigeria and all of that. You are going to speak to that and in relation to the topic. But I understand I have online Dr. Kole Adeodutola, then I'm going to come to you and then to Dr. Husseini. Dr. Odutola, can you put him on? Dr. Odutola is University of Florida. Or can we? Oh, 2 minutes, okay. So, can somebody pass the microphone to the gentleman? Who's the person handling the? Yes. Yes, can you? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yes, let me just.
Thank you very much. My name is Shegun Kerola Dimeji. My senior brother was Hakim Shita. Hakim Shita has over 30,000 negatives of Nigerian art between 1981 and 1997 when he died. So I have been assisting in curating the archive. But I noticed that his name was not on Wikipedia, whereas people who did lesser things, their names are there. So I asked Wikipedia to put his name there. They declined until I told them that iREP named him as Nigeria's alternative archive. Within an hour, his name got there. That was about 2 weeks ago.
Thank you.
So iREP should please keep it up. Thank you.
Is Dr. Odutola, a round of applause. I mean, those are the kind of initiatives that people can take. Is Dr. Odutola ready? If not, his question, if he's not able to speak. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much. I mean, it's a pleasure to be here and always a pleasure to be at the Stampede. All right, so when I got to the board, I found out that we needed to take archiving very seriously. We found that some of those, I could actually touch the registers that Chief Ademola James used in 1994 when he got there. And the #1 film there is Iyawo Alhaji by Dudu Alabi Undeyi and the rest. So those things, I found them in the office of the DG. And I just told myself that if we don't keep these things, one day we will not find this book. And then we started getting them out from the notebook to the system. And then the thought came that, look, we need to publish these things and make them available. Because before I became DG, a lot of people, students will call me because I write about films and all that. So they will think I have access to the DGs of Census Board or NFC. They will say, please, we are looking for so titles and the rest. I said, go to Census Board or go to NFC. They will say I should form the link. So now I'm the link. So I found myself to be the link. So I now decided that, look, we are going to publish them in 4 volumes. Okay. Officially, Chief Ademola James started registering those films in March 1994. So we begin from when he started registering the film, then we stop 10 years after, take another volume and the rest. So we are done with volume 1 and volume 2. But I personally stopped volume 1 because after a program on ARISE, I saw that there was a suggestion that we should go to the Federal Ministry of Information because censorship started from there, really. It didn't start with 1994 Census Board because at that time there was a cinematographic unit at the Federal Ministry of Information. We should go there, get the films, like all these Ogunde films and the rest that they censored, and we should have it in that first publication. So that's what delayed that, but it's almost ready now. We should get it out and present it formally at our digital conference. But this time it will be not just 1 volume, but 2 volumes and so on. And if that book comes out, it will put paid to all this talk about Palava was our first film. You know, a lot of people just come up with some narrative they read on YouTube and whatever. But if we have that book, this is record. This is like we're moving record from paper to book, you know, for some people. And these things will not just be in book form, they'll be available for you to access from wherever, whatever part of the world that you are. We are really working on that. I discovered that we have 280,000 copies of Nigerian films, 280,000 VCD, DVD, VHS. And we need to move them to a format that they can be accessible in the next 20 years. Otherwise, you will find a situation where you cannot get that. So presently, we are talking to some organizations because we can't do it. And we just got a deal where they will give us the equipment and I will put to good use the over 400 staff that I have so that we can, we can begin the process. And I'm sure if we take up to 6 months, we'll be able to move them to a format that we can do.
NYU will help out.
I mean, a round of applause again. I mean, a bigger round of applause. Yeah. I mean, I've heard you talk about it in the media, and I thought that was a very, very, very important work. And what you've even said now, 280,000 films that are just lying there that need to be, you know, converted into some sort of format. And this is also why it's very important to have people, you know, who've been in the industry, a journalist, an academic researcher, who therefore understands, you know, what matters exactly, you know, so that's very important. Mr. Auditola, Professor Auditola, University of Florida, we can't hear him. He seems to be talking, but we can't hear him.
Okay. Well, to those who can hear me, I just want to also throw in one more idea. When we all were growing up, there was one man from Germany who came many times to Nigeria. And his name is Bio Martins. And he tried, I mean, he called himself a dramologist. And he tried to build an archive of Nigerian music. And I know that in Germany right now, in the Walewa House, there is actually an archive that is maintained by Professor Bender. My question is there anybody in the audience who can help throw more light on what Bio Martins tried to do in terms of Nigerian music? That is one. The second one, which I want to respond to Elder Toya Kilsho, a geologist who I think represents the interest of scientists as well. I remember many years ago, before Dr. Saworoide died, he would always say, Colin, there is a need to begin to think of a germplasm that is an archive of seeds that Nigeria produces. So while the humanities are thinking of texts and text-like materials, maybe at another day, at another forum, you might also be asking those who are in charge of germplasm at the local and grassroots level. What are they doing? Who will take care of all of this? And in what way will they be presented so that they can be useful to people in the localities? Thank you very much indeed.
Yes.
Those online probably might hear me. Those who are offline, I hope somebody will be able to tell you what I said.
Thank you, Professor Odutola. I think Jahman wants to speak to the issue of biomartins, the question about biomartins archive, right?
Hello. I encountered biomartins, and I saw that archive. And recently, we were able to make contact back to them because we discovered that Professor Benda was still alive. So just like the work Awan was talking about, what you did on Kofi Ganaba. So he'd been able to collect most of the material from biomartins, but they are locked down in his basement. And he's afraid that if anything should go wrong, we will lose that archive. So he's trying to see the kind of thing that Ulibaya tried to do to repatriate all those, remember the battle with Toyin. So fortunately, we have a young pianist who had been a pianist in Lagos, then went to do his PhD. He's actually in Germany and is working with him now to see what can be done. But then the resources, the old professor cannot raise the fund to repatriate those works to this place, and he's looking for where to send them. So I think he's talking to some institution in the US where the work can just go. That's like passing from one place to another. So I don't know what we can do about it, but we are in conversation with him. Well, because they've tried to reach Nigerian system here, and we are not interested. Yeah. It's a personal archive for him. He doesn't have the original. Okay, I think what I'll do is I'll get Oladele Ayorin, who is the guy, he's a musicologist himself. Yes.
Okay, thank you for that bit of information. Do we still have okay, so we have two people, Professor Segun Ojewuyi from Illinois. Is he online? Okay. So can you put him on? And if you don't get him, we also have Mr. Tunde Aremu from Abuja. So if we can get any one of them. So is that Professor Jewi? Yeah, his camera is not on, and then we can't hear him. He seems to be muted. Can you unmute yourself, Professor Jewi? Okay. If Mr. Aremu can hear us, can you come on?
Maybe you take anybody.
Because I suppose I was going to just say we should round off. Okay. Yes. So, while we're waiting for Mr. Aremu or Professor Jewi, is there any other? Yeah, that's why we need to otherwise. I would have just wanted to round off. Somebody in Abuja, somebody in Abuja. Yes. Yes. The option, if the two of them can, okay, sorry, before I take, the option for the two of them, we can't get across, is for them to type their comment or question, and then we'll be able to take it here. So can you pass on the mic to the mic? Please, can you introduce yourself?
I'm Rosemary Akede. Okay. So my question this evening is about freedom creating my film. Maybe I have a film about child marriage. There's no child marriage in the West. It's not in the South. Up north. I have Muslim people. We have Muslims here. They don't practice child marriage. So will it be wrong for me to come from that angle to depict it from the angle of the northern people? Will I have that? I want our census board people to answer.
Is that a census or a filmmaking document? I think we have Professor Ankwan who will be an expert in that regard.
I have a script. I have a story where I need to, talk about child marriage.
No, I think we understand you. I'm just saying that the person is going to answer.
Okay.
Yes, I think he's going to answer. Professor Awankwa.
He can answer, but is the census board going to flag it, or am I going to change the demography of it?
Okay, you just need the census DG to talk. I thought what you need is technical expertise, not regulatory advice.
I don't really know the correct.
Yes, we are going to.
Okay. So as a filmmaker, I would say you're a Nigerian, you're a woman. Anything happens on the topics anywhere in Nigeria, you can make a film about it. That's all I can say to that. Now, I don't know if you're asking if Shaibu will take you to jail or not, but let him answer, let him speak for himself. But let me just say that artists we don't worry about that as the beginning, because if we do, we'll never actually express ourselves. So first do it, and then.
Because they mentioned the Chimamanda's story that they didn't allow her.
Well, first do it, then they can check to see, they can advise you, you can cut it again, but the point is that first do the work.
Okay, and see if it.
I think she really needs to get the clear from the regulator.
I don't want to do it twice.
It's yes.
Oja, we want to use the phone to get.
Okay. Is that Professor Ojewi? Okay. Madam, you can talk to him later.
Go after this subject very diligently. I have to say that BJ was not just a literary person, was not just writing, was also very performative in everything he did. Those of you who know me, I would limit my presentation or question to that area that you know me with, which is theater and performance. In all of this discourse, there's not been a mention of theater at all, because it's very difficult to document, to archive. And so the question is, how do we go about this? Because this is an important part of our history, important part of our social memory and experiment. And in fact, BJ's work also moved into this area very, very seriously. Awam came from the theater and moved into film, which is easier to document. But these days, because of that, maybe perhaps because of what Twain observed or Kunle observed about that lapse in our history in the curriculum, we now have in the theater people who stand up and just declare themselves the omega and be-all of theater in Nigeria, with disregard for history, for memory, for the practice that had long existed before them. I was recently in Nigeria, and I was there were two festivals happening at the same time. I was, a little disappointed. One was good, really, but that was the one that was marginalized. because it was too serious. And it seems that there's a new crop of audience or theater now that I call the theater of skits and confetti, which is just kind of instant gratification. That's also part of the box. But what about the serious part? And those who lived through the 70s, 80s, 90s, and theater in Nigeria would know that it was up to something very serious. So please help me. How can we start to think and actually make practical efforts to archive theatrical productions and history in Nigeria? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. To confess, I didn't hear most of that. And I don't think a question came out of it. If there's a question, can somebody repeat it? Okay, it's a comment. Okay. Yeah. So, and I imagine that when we get the recording, we'll then be able to really follow what else. Is Mr. Remu still there? Otherwise, I can then engage the panel for the last round. Is Mr. Remu there? Okay, so let's round up. So it's been, for me, it's been a very, very illuminating session, airing from this side and also from the other side. From Professor Awampam, who's done a lot of work on documentation, both theoretically and practically, and has set up institutions in Africa and in Middle East, doing some of this kind of work, and also bringing us his practical experience about some of the challenges, part fundraising, part how to also handle the issue of vulnerability of archival materials. He has told us about that. Mr. Akinsho, who insists that besides the issue of collecting and preserving archives, it's also engagement of the public in it, programming, how that is very, very important. That in fact we are not doing it even for the cultural spaces that we have today. And then to Mr. Jibadi, who says that look, especially for history of social movements in Nigeria and engagement with the current generation, that we need to do a lot more to actually engage that generation so that they can benefit, from it. So I'm going to give them the microphone for the last time now to now say, look, what would you then like to say to filmmakers now? Because this is an audience of documentary filmmakers. What will be your advice in terms of how to engage archive, how to access archive, in fact, how to look for archives in terms of relevant archives that are, important for the work you are doing as filmmakers in the audience? What would you say?
Thank you. I think one of the most important things to consider when producing an archive is access. So, because sometimes, like the point Jahman was making earlier, somebody has all this stuff put in the basement of their house. That's not an archive. What makes an archive is the ability to access it. If the people can't access it, it's a waste of time. It's furniture. Yeah, it's furniture. So, and access comes again with education, right? How are you using it becomes important, right? So if you put together, let's say a journalist is looking for a particular idea or an item, universities traditionally should have libraries, but I know that's a big question. So where else can you get those materials? That's where, when people are building those archives, they should create a protocol for accessing it, and also a general guidelines of how it can be used, because it can also be misused, right? So that's just a general thing. For filmmakers, however, you look at a country like Nigeria where we have so many stories that are undocumented, and the current generation and after will not go to theaters to watch these films. So they'll have to watch it on their phones, they have to watch it on their laptops, and so on. So we should be making films in that direction and creating repositories where they can be accessed. Now, YouTube is free, right? You have Vimeo, you have so many other platforms. And you don't also have to go on to Netflix or Amazon. sorry, I'm not busting their business. They do what they do, but they shouldn't be the monopoly, right? In fact, David Oyelowo just set up his own streaming service called Mansa, right? So there are other opportunities for Nigerians to do what actually Nollywood did, to say, go to hell everybody, we want to start even if it's bad, right? So we have to go back to creating a new regime for making documentaries, feature films, and ways of distributing them, and ways of archiving them. There will be many festivals that will be opportunities. There will be government institutions like Shaibu and other people who work in government who know about the value of this stuff, would be the partners in making sure that what is produced exists. And then finally, again, in reference to our dear teacher, Bjorn J4, was that he, if you've ever been in any of BJ's living quarters, it's surrounded with books, and many books. So you have to think about, where do we go to access things like, what was he reading? How was he applying them? In not only in his scholarship, but in his political activism. He was very, very active. So the challenge we're faced now is we're seeing more and more of our teachers dying. So what are we going to do about it? Because we don't want their death to just erase them from the history of knowledge making. So we have an immediate, urgent responsibility, just as people below us will have that responsibility in the imaginations of multiple generations of Nigerians to come.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you very much. MDB has died, or somebody has died, and you say, oh, a library has fallen. I'm sorry, Professor, I noticed that I was going to, in the 21st century, you know, and it speaks to the issue of archives, you know, and all of that. Now, I'm going to, before I pass the mic to you, I think Jahman has been able to get the summation of what Professor Ojewuyi said. First, he said that the Akim Shita archive deserves to be encouraged and supported. So, and I think a round of applause again to the gentleman that did. So it's easier to archive films, visual arts, photography, but difficult to archive theatrical performances. How can we strategize to archive performances, which are living things? But I think it also relates to the broad theme of this conference. How do you bootstrap things about using mobile phone and the rest of it? I mean, you can speak to it as you round off.
Whatever it is at the archival infrastructure, we have to create an activity to get people to be able to access it. So that access can be promotion, but it also, the way it works most of the time is the activity. When you know that people walk into that bookstore, I think that we need to do more of those things around anything that we're putting together as infrastructure of culture. But I wanted to take at that is not doing enough of the experiential. You know, there's trying to be in activities where the DG and other people are engaging in some, you know, if we treat culture journalism as experiential, and we pick stories that are, that are, as Awam says, are anomalous. I mean, it tends to bring people more to the cultural platforms than just to say that you are doing reviews or you are reporting the book reading as it were. That, for me, is also part of the activities that because the review, the cultural journalism is the soft infrastructure of the archiving. Archiving is usually a physical thing. And, the people who report culture, if they're engaging society enough, and they're moving around and collecting and, talking about things, it's not just about this is a fancy work of art. It is, it's about the life of the artist, about studio practice, studio engagement. It's about, it's about catching up the actor after the play, and not just walking and saying that you've seen the play, you are going to review it. It's about engaging that particular star actor that you've never seen him perform and is a standout. It makes culture journalism far more interesting than it is today, where people just see that all you're trying to do is to say that somebody said he said somewhere. You know, I needed to make that, because one of the things that can help with these activities that we're talking about, with this archiving and museum visits that we all need to do, and all of the things that provide access, you know, are really in the hands of the culture journalist. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. We started with his name as BJ. I would like us to end with his name on this note. When you make your films, in whatever forms, just remember that you will interface with institutions and you will interface with individuals. I've heard some people, you know, talk about that today. The important thing is that when you interface with institutions like the Census Board, you interface with critics, with journalists, never ever lose your freedom as an artist, as a creator. Believe very much in yourself. And I want to use this anecdote just to illustrate that. I will remember that in 1983, Wole Soyinka did a film called Blues for a Prodigal. It was a low budget film. I think it was in it. And what Soyinka wanted to do was to really combat MPN, the National Party of Nigeria, and what it was doing with that film, right? Low budget film, it wasn't supposed to be a grand thing. It was supposed to be an extension of other things that he was doing in the, you know, on radio that time. Take the Right Step and all, you know, songs like that, and guerrilla performances all over the place. And here was Biodun J4, who was expecting something grand from Wole Soyinka. So he wrote this skating review of Blues for a Prodigal in Daily Sketch in Ibadan. Right? Everybody read the stuff. And Soyinka, of course, I read that stuff the same day, the same morning that Biodun J4 went to his house in the quarters and said, you know, just generally the usual thing. They would go to his house for Cuban cigars, for wine, for whiskey and all that. So he got to Wole Soyinka's house and asked for, what would you like to drink? Whiskey. Oh, okay, whiskey, you know. Soyinka went to his cellar, bring out the whiskey, right? And then, where's your glass? You know, pour the whiskey, you know, for him. And BJ was about to drink the whiskey when he said, wait, just a second. Before you drink the whiskey, before you drink that whiskey, what's that rubbish you wrote about the blue for a prodigal? And because of what you wrote, may the whiskey burn your throat. Of course, the whiskey did not burn BJ's throat. He had written his piece, and he was at peace with it. All right? He had his freedom. He exercised that freedom as a critic, and Soyinka also exercised his freedom as a writer. So it's important never ever to give in, you know, make the best use of your freedom as a writer, and make the best use of your freedom too as a critic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I mean, we all agree that it's been a great session. Thank you, Professor Akpan, New York University, Abu Dhabi, Mr. Akinsho, Cora, African Language Report, Book Adville, Gugwe. And Mr. I'm Mr. Kunle Ajibade of the newspaper. Thank you very much. It's been my pleasure too.
Please, a big round of applause for the panelists. And to say that Kayode Komolafe tried to join online. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it. Yeah. So thank you very much. This is the last plenary of iREP 15.0, iREP 2026. I cannot wait to get into the beer parlor now and get done. But there are films still being shown. There are 2 more films in the screening room 1 and another one in screening room 2. So as you stretch your leg, just go in there and see the artworks around. Thank you for being a beautiful audience. If you register, you are likely to get most of the recordings from this place. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Let me join you.
Lady, make it give am a laugh, even no give am a laugh, she will run away. She will run away. Sapele lady, make it give am a kukume oh. If you no give am a kukume oh, she go run away. If you marry Ghana lady, make it give am a kanki oh. If you no give am a kanki oh, she go run away. Lady, make it give am akuo. If you no give am akuo, she go run away. If you marry Igbo lady, make it give am akuo. If you no give am akuo, she go run away. Lady, make it give am ogogoro. If you no give am ogogoro,